I'm a pretty creative person, and now suddenly you can engineer biology and life and you can build things. So that's how I got into the sciences. And then I made the decision. I was like, you know what, economics is great, but I think I found my passion. And then I switched and went to pursue biotech.
Hey, Rum, how's it going?
It's going. 'Tis the season, at least for me. I love Halloween.
Yeah, so we're recording this actually on Halloween. And so when this goes live, it'll be a couple of days after. I know you guys all dress up. What is Adam going to be this year? And what are you guys dressing to support him?
Well, I was asking him like 3 weeks before Halloween, what do you want to be for Halloween? Granted, he is 2 years old. So this is a lot of concepts like holidays, Halloween, wearing costumes.
Right.
But he kept saying Blippi. I want to be Blippi, which is a character. He's an actual person dressed up. He wears like suspenders and a bow tie and a hat and orange glasses. So I was like, okay, I will get these accessories and you could be Blippi. I was like, let me just see if he wears this because he doesn't wear hats or glasses. I was correct because he's not wearing it. Today's Halloween. I got the whole outfit together and he just takes it all off. He's like, no, I don't want to be Blippi. So I'm like, ugh. Our fallback was getting t-shirts of the characters of Bluey, which is a kid's show. Everyone says it's a parenting show because the parents on the show do the best they can to support their children and they go above and beyond as parents. So I just have a t-shirt that says mom. And my husband has a t-shirt that says dad, and he is Bingo, not Bluey, the younger character. So that's our fallback.
I don't know Blippi. I looked at him. He looks like he wears a mushroom hat, but it's just a light blue and orange hat. I'm sure all the parents out there listening to this who know Blippi will laugh at me. That's okay. I went through a different kind of young children's phase. And as for Bluey, it looks like a family of dogs. Do these dogs have t-shirts that say mom and dad on them? Which one is Bluey?
Bluey's a blue one.
He's the youngest dog?
No, Bluey and Bingo are girls. Got to shift your mind frame. Blue isn't for boys, it's for girls. Girls can be blue. So like that's something we all need to wrap our head around. Stop gendering colors. We need to stop gendering colors.
Oh my God, that is a hard thing to do. Yeah, so I remember when my boys were that young, the two things I remember very specifically, when Alejandro was really young, putting him into a little duck outfit, which he hated and cried. So that did not work. I remember Felix, probably when he was like 4, wanting to be a robber. So he had a striped black and white shirt, did some face makeup, and had a rope in a bag. And then Tomas was always very creative in creating his own costumes. He had a Steve of Minecraft costume very early on, probably right after Minecraft was released. He created the head and people would stop him on the street because it was still such a new concept. There was another year where he was a pet store. He created a box that he wore that had all these little windows and each one opened up to show a different pet. But I also can't forget that there was a year when Felix was really young that he wanted to be a trash can. So we made a costume that he wore. It was like a plastic trash can that he wore. We took the lid and turned it into a hat. We stuffed a bunch of paper in there and he was a garbage can filled with the garbage. So I haven't dressed up as anything for a really long time, which is sad, but I do love Halloween. It is my favorite.
Humbug.
We're in New York City, so we love watching the West Village parade. And then given that I'm in Park Slope, there's a parade here, and I just love seeing the creativity. I'm expecting to see a lot of Barbie and Ken, which is not really that creative. Those are adult costumes. I think if we were hanging on the bar scene, we'd see a lot of them and be kind of fun, maybe. Mm-hmm. But I just love seeing all the creativity. Now, you had said that Adam doesn't really get the candy thing. And I asked you yesterday, what's your favorite candy? So what's your favorite candy?
I don't really eat as much sugar as I used to, but when I was younger, I loved Twix, Stickers, and hot tamales, the spicy candy. It's like a jelly bean candy and like the hot cinnamon hearts. Those are my favorite. And I lived in a suburb growing up and we would take pillowcases around and just get them full of candy, would have them year round. But at the end of the year, it'd be like Mike and Ike's licorice and things that we like never would eat. So there's
all the unfavorites.
All the unfavorites. But what about you? What's your favorite candy?
Well, honestly, I like all candy. I also do not eat candy very often. I've become very partial to these Mexican candies that are spicy tamarind. I think those started appearing here a few years ago. Felix was obsessed with them. Like when he was little, he had a Mexican babysitter and she would bring them. And I've become obsessed with those too. But I think just anything chocolate. And then I kind of put in the notes, what about fermented candy, which I'm not sure there is any fermented candy. If you've got a fermented candy or you've made something from fermentation that turns into candy, you better have a good story.
I guess the thing is, how do you keep the microbes alive? Unless it's like in a gel. I don't know what I'm thinking, actually.
Yeah, I'm not thinking about living candy. That's a whole other
Like a
direction to
probiotic
go
candy.
in. Yeah.
I was thinking of probiotic candy.
No kid is going to eat that.
Oh, unless it tastes delicious. I mean, I like kombucha, but that's still living probiotic. In terms of fermenting, because obviously ferment into sugars. No, you use sugars to ferment into something else. But what would that something else be? I guess it could be the topic of our conversation that we'll get into.
Yeah, I mean, before we get into that, I just want to mention, so kids are going to be eating a lot of candy. A lot of those candies contain colors, and many of those colors are used only in the United States. The EU has a history, maybe recent history, of banning a lot of things that are still used as ingredients in the United States. But there is this trend towards the creation of natural, non-oil-based dyes. I don't know if they're finding their way into food. We did have an interview with Elliot of Spira, and he was using spirulina to create dyes that could be used in food. So food grade dyes produced with algae.
Yeah, we use those.
Yeah. And then the latest news I saw was that I think they're based in the UK, Colorifics. They are a textile dyeing company. They partnered with Basecamp Research, and Basecamp is kind of like a commercial version of our friends at Cultivarium, where they're exploring the natural world really in extreme environments and looking for bacteria that do special things, including produce colors. And bacteria do this. Bacteria work in basically every color of the rainbow. We have a guest coming up, not in this episode, but in a future episode, who's going to talk about using bacteria to dye textiles.
Yeah, I think it's very fascinating. There are a lot of companies that are making these dyes. You mentioned Elliot and his company, Spira. He sent over us a variety pack of colors, which thank you so much, Elliot. You're amazing for sending that to us. And it was 4 colors, green, yellow, red, and blue. But what was beautiful about it, I used it actually to make cookies. And the colors were very organic looking. It wasn't a bright yellow, like school bus yellow, but it was a nice muted yellow, a muted blue color, almost like a periwinkle versus a Cookie Monster blue. It was really, really nice. And then I gave them to your wife, Kristen, to experiment with, since she's an art teacher. And we were thinking, oh, this would be fun to put into other foods or maybe drinks to make them different colors. We'll have to get together with Kristen and experiment some more.
So my wife is a school teacher and also an artist, and her medium is encaustic, which is basically a form of painting with wax. And I think she was interested in using those dyes to change the color of the waxes she uses. There are many colored waxes, or she puts a pigment into the wax, but I think she was interested in seeing how those colors would interact with the wax that she uses. Speaking of Elliot just shared news yesterday, which I think is interesting. He's going to be joining Deep Science Ventures as a portfolio manager and business development and venture portfolio manager focused on agriculture. So congratulations to Elliot. That's a great position for him. I'm looking forward to hearing how that goes and catching up with him real soon.
Yeah, that's really exciting. I think he's perfect. If you guys listen to Elliot's episode, we'll share it in the show notes. You don't have to search for it, but he'd be perfect for that job. He really looks at markets and pricing and thinks about the whole rigmarole of business. I just am so proud and happy for Elliot. It's amazing.
Yeah. So just 2 more quick things before we get into the episode. The fall is always very busy. We call it the season of the grind. We've said that before. I'm going to be attending a happy wellness conference here in New York City on Friday. I'm hoping to run into and have a conversation with Jasmina Aganovich, who was on our podcast many episodes ago and recently launched a perfume fragrance called Future Society.
Before you get into it, so what's a happy wellness conference? It sounds like a very woo-woo, let's kumbaya conference, but what exactly is going to be happening at this Happy Wellness Conference?
The idea is to show what's happening in the world of wellness. A lot of the things we talk about here are related to wellness. I'm looking at some of the speakers. The Secrets to Wellness, Inside and Out. That's the keynote first thing in the morning. There's people going to be talking about the markets. Jasmine is going to talk about biotech and beauty. Someone's going to be talking about the microbiome. Someone's going to be talking about collagen, which is apropos to what we're about to start talking about. It looks like it's going to be an interesting day. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be interesting just to see what people in the wellness space are saying and how they might be thinking about biotech or synthetic biology.
Cool. And then we have a big event coming up, which we're not attending, but is a big bio event in Europe called BioEU. That's exciting. What are you excited about, Karl?
Well, so BioEU is the Biotechnology International Organization, hosts the biggest, I'm pretty sure it's the biggest conference here in the US once a year. They change cities every year. And you basically get, mostly it's on the pharmaceutical side, biopharma side. You get the big pharmaceutical companies and you get many, many startups. And then the people that service the startups or the people that service the pharma industry. So like the clinical research organizations, the contract manufacturing and development organizations, consultants like us, tons and tons of startups, and people in finance who are going to look for the next big trends. We've got several friends who are going to BioEU. So shout out to Davide at Officina Bio. We have some of our friends at Novo Holdings are going. I'm under the impression that there'll be several people from Ginkgo Bioworks. So there's a lot of people who go to these events. They can be overwhelming. And I think it's important to have a strategy for attending a conference like that, which is something we can talk about at some point in the future. You and I have written about it. We talk about it. But if you're going to BioEU and you don't have a strategy, drop us an email because we can help you come up with some ideas really fast, or we'll point you to the blog posts that we've written in the past about how to attend a conference. I also noticed that in going through this agenda for the Happy Wellness Conference, they mentioned that one of the afternoon sessions is about collagen, which is the perfect transition to our episode today. Collagen is used in many things, and we previously have had Alex Lorestani of Geltor on the podcast. Today, we're going to be joined by Stephanie Michelsen of Jellatech, who also produces collagen using synthetic biology techniques.
The whole beauty, personal care, food tech industry is being upended by biotechnology. There's so many applications for collagen that we need to bring all these different founders on to the podcast so that they can kind of share the perspectives, because they're all a bit different, and see how they're getting into the market.
All right, let's start the interview. All right, Stephanie Michelsen, welcome to the Grow Everything podcast. We've known each other for a couple of years, mostly through SymBioBeta. I knew you as someone who was a Danish person, if I can say that, who was living on the West Coast and then moved to the East Coast. For our listeners who don't know anything about you, please give us an introduction. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Stephanie. I'm the founder and CEO of Jellatech, an early-stage biotech company focusing on building the future of protein production, really focusing on collagen and gelatin. I'm born in Denmark, as you said, so I'm a Dane. And grew up in Sweden, spent some years in the Bay Area, and then moved here to the Research Triangle about 3 years ago, which is where Biotech is based and where we're scaling up. I guess it's a short little snippet about me.
Awesome.
So my question is a two-part question. First, what got you interested in science and technology, and what did you study in school?
So actually, growing up, I used to hate science. That was like the one thing I didn't like. I was like, chemistry, biology, this is not for me, and physics and stuff. And that lasted all the way through starting university. So I went to community college and I started studying economics. I was like, this is in everything. It's something that I enjoy. And then part of my general education, I took an anthropology class. And that's where we learned about DNA, genetics. I took a class on genetic diseases and I fell in love with it. I was like, this is so cool. Like, I'm a pretty creative person. And now suddenly you can engineer biology and life and you can build things. So that's how I got into the sciences. And then I made the decision. I was like, you know what? Economics is great, but I think I found my passion. And then I switched and went to pursue biotech. So full 180.
That's amazing. What was the path from doing that 180 to starting Jellatech? Tell us about the company and what was the origin story?
Yeah. So I think I've always been pretty entrepreneurial minded. I've always wanted to build something myself. And I've always admired people that have some kind of idea, obvious or crazy or whatever, and then they take it and build a company or product out of it. So obviously, as I said, I found my passion. I listened. I decided to stop economics and then went to pursue biotechnology. I actually decided to move back to Denmark to do so. So I did my undergrad in biotech and then I did my graduate degree in biotech. And then after that, I went to intern and work in different biotech startups in the Bay Area, actually. One of them was a tissue engineering company. Another one was a biotech company developing meat-free or animal-free pet foods. And that's how I got into the alternative protein space within biotech. So basically, any and all effort to move away from animal agriculture and build more sustainable solutions, whether that be for food and beverage, materials, or other applications. I found I really like this marriage of impact and sustainability and then biotech and science. So I love that. And then I love the fact that it was something relatable. When we talk about biotech, a lot of people maybe shy away from it unless they're in the industry because it's complex. But then when it's like food, materials, personal care things, it's relatable. So I love that. I just saw a huge gap when it came to complex proteins. So right now, there's been a lot of companies that at that time were working on lab-grown meat or precision fermentation, efforts to replace meat, dairy, cheese. But what I think was missing was all the byproducts, like the waste materials from animal agriculture, things like collagen, is derivative gelatin, which are very unique functional proteins, and they have so many applications, and there's no replacement that isn't animal derived. So I wanted to build a company that would solve all the bits and the pieces, leftover things where at the time there was just no solution for it. And that's how Jellatech was born.
That's very admirable that you really took a look at the market and saw a gap and went for it. I mean, I think some people just come with ideas and don't necessarily do that. They're like, I just have an idea, I'm going to go for it. But you really took an economical approach. So very, very smart. So you're focusing on collagen. We actually had Alex from Geltor.
Yeah.
He was on here, talked a little bit about collagen, but something that we wanted to deep dive with you is, can you talk about the current supply chains of collagen? You mentioned the waste product of animal production, but what happens after that? What's the difference between collagen and gelatin? And how are you using it today?
Yeah, so how you get collagen and gelatin today is basically you have animal farms where you grow a lot of animals, you ship them to a slaughterhouse, they get slaughtered, then they go to the meat packing facility where they process the meat and butcher and so on. And then all the kind of leftover pieces that we don't eat, so tendons, skin, hooves, bones, stuff like this, that is something where you can extract collagen from that. So that goes to then a collagen or gelatin plant or manufacturer where they extract, isolate, and purify collagen. Then you can actually process collagen into gelatin. Collagen is a triple helical protein. So imagine 3 strings of spaghetti together forming this triple helix. Gelatin is derivatives. If you heat it up, these spaghetti strands or whatever, the peptides will come apart and then you get this gelling effect. If anyone's ever made jello or jello shots or whatever, you heat it up and then it's loose and liquid. And then when you cool it down, it comes this gel. So that's the unique functionality that this protein has. And that's why we're taking a cell-based approach, because animal and human cells, we get that full-length collagen, which we can use as is, or you can chop it into peptides, or you can process it and get gelatin. I was amazed. I knew of applications when I started the company, but since it's been really interesting to learn all the other applications, definitely in food and beverage, a lot in the confectionery space, gummies, like the texture, even in yogurts to make it thicker, a texturizer, emulsifier, but also in places like film photography, you coat film with gelatin or as a vaccine stabilizer, or for tissue regeneration. It's a structural protein. So it has applications across industries, and we're B2B focusing on all these, really starting with lower volume, higher premium applications. And as we scale, we can start targeting those massive volumes at lower cost.
Now, I had no idea that gelatin or even collagen were being used in more medical applications. And if people are using animal-derived collagen for those applications, how do the manufacturers ensure the purity? That's question number 1. And then question number 2, how does your solution blow that purity out of the water if it does?
As is, right? Like we have to rely on animals to get it. So when you have a herd of thousands of different animals, obviously every time that batch can look a little bit different. Animals get diseases. There can be disease outbreaks. And some years ago, there was the African swine flu, which wiped out a bunch of cattle in Asia. And then the cattle from Europe got shipped over there. And then suddenly in Europe, you're faced with 3 times as expensive price for the raw material in just 1 quarter. It's not super reliable. Purity you can kind of get to, but like the quality you can't really ensure because you're stuck taking it as is. Whatever you have is what you're going to get. What we do is we actually start with 1 single animal and we take a little biopsies from the skin. We can isolate cells. We then make a cell bank. So we immortalize the cells so we can continue to grow the cells. And then we basically like milk those cells for protein. And that way we get a very reliable output. And it's also easier process to get this protein out from a cell culture versus from hooves or tendons or whatever, because you have to break up a lot of really tough tissue to get that out. For us, it's a lot more accessible, so we can kind of pick it out, and then it's a simple process. It's more scalable. We input X, we output Y. There's not going to be any inconsistencies or process. We get the same thing pretty much every time. It's from one single individual initially. So it's just more reliable. And obviously the beautiful thing too is you can actually in the future decentralize the production. You're not having to have these massive plants located wherever and then like ship a bunch of, you can actually have local production of these proteins, which I think with any biotech solution, you can kind of do that. So that's a little bit like how we differ from traditional, inefficient. It's also space that hasn't really been innovated a whole lot. So it's just been, oh, this is how it is. This is how we're going to do it. But actually now we are able to use biotech and we can make it better and more efficient.
Yeah, that's amazing. You hit on something that Karl and I talk about a lot is the decentralized production. We think that's going to have a lot of positive benefits to the United States and every country. I mean, every country, if they can just produce their own materials. So that's really exciting. And thank you again. I just want to echo what Karl said, just in terms of educating us on all the different applications. We just weren't aware. But as an entrepreneur, you have lots of opportunities to hit different markets. What are your plans? What's the first type of collagen you're going to create and for what market?
That's a great question. I think maybe a lot of entrepreneurs have been faced with this. You start out and then you get, interest and you're like, oh my God, I want to do it all. We are going to do it all. And then you realize we can't do it all. You can't boil the ocean. You have to kind of focus a little bit. So we are starting with the lower hanging fruit, which is applications that require lower volume, applications that can have a higher premium. And also ideally some places that don't require initially the same regulatory hurdles or approval that you need for like food and beverage or something like this. We're actually starting in the R&D space, the biomedical, pharma applications. Initially, if someone's developing, let's say a cell therapy company or something like this, they'll have to go through the clinical trials, but before they do that, they want to do some testing. And that's a place where, for example, our human collagen is a really, really good solution because they currently have to rely on animal collagen, which could be like immunogenic. It's just not really as good as human. So that's something as well that we can grow in the lab. Right now, you have to take human collagen from people that donate their body to science, and then you can extract it. It's not really reliable. It's not really nice. We can grow in the lab and we could do it cheaper and we can do it larger scale. We can do it consistently. So that's something that we've seen a lot of interest for, even beyond the impact and the sustainability and the ethical aspect. It's also just having this reliable supply, reliable quality. Those are the kind of things that we're focusing on. So we're taking advantage of we are small scale. It is expensive to produce at this scale. Why don't we target the applications where we can be relevant? And then as we continue to scale, that can then expand. We can move into cosmetics, personal care, and then nutraceuticals, supplements, and then eventually broader food and beverage or materials applications.
When it comes to those medical applications, you said that you don't face a regulatory barrier, but I'm curious, you specifically talked about human collagen. Are you guys producing other animal collagens? And what's the performance characteristics of different collagens?
So right now we have porcine, bovine, and human collagen. And obviously human collagen is not for eating. And for medical applications, you definitely will have to go through regulatory inspections and all this stuff. But we're B2B, so we're not really developing the final product. If it's an injectable or if it's a coating for a medical implant or something, that's not on us. But we're building out the facility to be able to produce it, consistently with quality, to be the company that develops the product to go through that. So it will come, but not today. The gene is actually pretty well conserved across species. There are slight differences in the amino acid sequence. There's differences in how much hydroxyproline, which is basically a modification of the protein. So there's slight differences. And then we talked about, the immunogenic response can also be different. So that's why if it's for human applications, you would probably rather use a human collagen, or if you're doing studies or whatever, if it's eventually going to go into human, growing it on a human collagen scaffold will be more translatable. For bovine as well, if there's companies developing candies or whatever, and they currently use porcine or bovine, obviously they just want to plug and play and make it as easy for them as possible with no surprises on how it's going to function.
Right. But on that same note, those are the existing performance characteristics. Have you thought about new performance characteristics that you could engineer? And can you talk about some ideas or thoughts you have on that?
Yeah. So we started out with, we're going to solve a problem that's today and tomorrow, which is, can we make the same protein in a better way, grown in a lab without needing to go back into animals? So that we've proven for the species I mentioned, but definitely in the future, there are other species or there's other types of collagen. There are modifications to the protein itself. There are other proteins as well that we can produce. So that's the beauty of growing things in the lab, is that we're not constricted to the natural world as is. If you think about I use the example of a sea cucumber collagen or something like this, which maybe would be really hard to get in nature or really difficult and just not scalable and just not worth it. If we take cells from this animal or another animal, we can grow that in the lab, and then we can actually make it in larger volumes than we could in nature. We can also tweak it because we're growing it in cells. We can change and decide the surrounding parameters in which they grow, which can actually have an impact on the performance of the protein or tweak it. So that is definitely something that we are actively looking into and have even started working on some of those things.
It's very exciting. So one thing, and you told me if I'm wrong, collagen's like one of the most abundant proteins in the human body, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. And I think people don't yet realize that because it might differ species to species, it might have different performance characteristics. What people may not understand yet is if you can't isolate a sufficient quantity, you would never really understand what those performance characteristics are, and you can make that possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then I think taking it further is being able to understand not just the functionality of those different collagens, but understanding how different molecules perform based on different changes in the amino acid sequence. But thinking further, being able to take those and maybe fusing them with another protein that confers even different performance characteristics.
Exactly. I mean, we're really at the beginning, sort of the tip of the iceberg of what we can do. Right now, we've done it sort of as is, as like a plug and play solution. Now in the future, we can start getting even more creative and adding functionalities or switching functionalities or removing certain things that you don't want. These are the next steps for the company, and different types of collagen. It depends on like which tissue you have, skin, or maybe you have some more like cartilage tissue as well. And there's different collagens that can play in. And some can also work in synergy or with other proteins. So that's definitely something that we're super interested in doing. And like it can actually have a huge impact on human health as well, if we're able to do so.
I really appreciate the way that you're thinking about this. When you said the sea cucumber collagen example, and I know it's an example, but what kind of applications that could have. And there's just so many animals, although the variety of animals has been dwindling, and so sad to talk about that. But if there is some rare animal and you collect some cells from it and see how it performs for a variety of use cases, when I think collagen, the first thing that comes to mind is skincare and beauty. And how can we have flawless skin when we're 100 years old? I'm really excited about that part of it. And I can see why you have raised money. You recently raised a round in August, so congratulations. And it sounds like that money is going to be used to scale up your protein manufacturing platform.
Yeah.
Big question we always ask, because it's always the elephant in the room. What are the biggest challenges for scaling up? And how do you plan on overcoming these challenges? Sharing in a way, of course, that doesn't reveal too much. I know IP is very sensitive, but like, what can you share with our audience about that?
I think the hardest part about scaling what we do, so cells, animal cells and human cells, that conventionally it was more used for research applications, like medical applications that can bear really high costs. Now we're competing if we're making bovine or porcine collagen or even a gelatin. Those are not high cost for food and beverage applications. It's a waste product. We're really trying to get to a place of being at price parity or even below for all the applications, but that's going to be hard. That's where single-use plasticware and stuff like this just doesn't make sense. And like all this, like it's just too expensive. It's not sustainable. That I think is the biggest challenge. You can do it, but it has to be at a point where it makes sense financially. Like the unit economics need to make sense. You can go and raise a bunch of money, but eventually you're going to have to make some revenue and eventually got to get to profitability. So that's something that we've been very mindful of, is whatever step we take forward to larger scale needs to obviously work scientifically and biologically, but it also needs to be financially viable. And I think that's one of the challenges. We're very lucky that we can target multiple industries. So we can be relevant even at the pilot scale for those R&D or medical applications. And then in the future, as we continue to scale, as costs come down, there's significant technical development for like media, things like this, then we'll be able to kind of hit those food and beverage applications. So I think scaling sustainably in terms of, yes, the planet, but also economically sustainable, I think that is a challenge, and how we're thinking about it. And so we're a little bit different because we grow the cells, but the cells are not the product. We want to scale in a way we're concerned about cell growth for a certain amount of time, and then it's just all about protein production. The more output we can get per input, that's the best way to decrease cost. Just increase the yield. That's the easiest way. And that's, again, where like engineering and being able to control the parameters and the environment, that's something that can really, really help you get even more out of each cell or the time that you have with these cells. So that's how we're thinking about scaling.
I'm curious, earlier we talked about distributed biological manufacturing, meaning you could have multiple facilities. They wouldn't have to be these large, like I think of a rendering plant where you're taking all the animal parts and turning them into collagen. But as you think about the future of the company, what does that look like, especially when you consider this idea of distributed manufacturing?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about collagen and gelatin goes into so many different applications. And a lot of the companies that use these proteins, they would like to have their own production of them and be able to have it like control over the supply chain so that they know what's coming in, they know what the quality is going to be, the yield is going to be. That's kind of how I'm envisioning it, like adding a step to your existing process. Let's say you're making candy or you're making capsules for pharmaceuticals or whatever it may be. You could just add a step beforehand where now you're growing the raw material as well, plugging it into your production, whether it's like like I said, candies or capsules or whatever. That's how I could see it happening in the future. I think as well for, let's say, lab grown fish or stuff like this too, like you're no longer constrained by having to get fish or seafood from the water or the coast. Like you can grow it in the middle of the country if you need to. It would still be fresh. So I think decentralizing things and being able to just be closer, having the whole package as like, if you're a large company, I think there's huge benefits in that.
The applications are making my mind race, but I am curious. I know as an entrepreneur, you have a very specific strategy based on how much money you raise and how much money you need to make. But if you can choose any application that you're really excited about, what would it be? What are your most exciting applications that you're like, this is definitely going to change the game?
We were born into the alternative protein space. That's where we came into the world, which is like food and beverage applications. I think since I've realized that, and we've gotten so much inbound interest, and I think right now I'm really excited about the medical applications, especially with the human collagen. We have companies that are doing cell therapy for different problems or issues. And I feel like them being able to use human collagen, I think that will just significantly improve it and make it more feasible much sooner. We talked about collagen is like the most abundant protein in our bodies. It's about 30%. And it decreases as we get older. We start producing less and less and less. We can change that. People that have osteoarthritis, maybe you can inject collagen or other proteins in there to actually help rebuild and make it stronger. And I feel like that could significantly improve human health and quality of life. I'm definitely also excited about still the food and beverage, because if we can get to that scale, then that's going to make a huge impact on the planet. So I think just the idea of being independent of animal agriculture and not having to rely on the same amount of land, and like animals, you grow them for like 3 to 5 years. Our process takes about 4 weeks. We're not talking years, we're talking weeks. We're not at the scale same yet, but we will get there. But I think it just unlocks so many things. And I think even being able to engineer stuff in the future, I don't even know what this conversation would look like in 2 years, but that's where I am today. I'm just like, oh, and we keep getting inbound things. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was an application. Or like retina repair. That's apparently something where you have to get a donor or something. And not anymore, maybe, not in a few years.
Yeah, that's amazing, Stephanie. You mentioned animal agriculture and cellular agriculture, and we know that you're also on the board of a company that's developing cultivated meat products.
Yeah.
You're also on the board of Parity Foods, which is an alternate shellfish company. Can you talk about those and your involvement in the cultivated meat space and how it relates to the work that you guys are doing at Jellatech?
Yeah, so on Jellatech's side, we also have a few cell-based meat companies that have reached out that would like to use collagen or gelatin either as a scaffold or like a texturizer. It's a unique protein. You can't find it from plants. There's similar proteins, but not really. So that's a place where I guess Jellatech could fit into the lab-grown meat space or even the plant-based meat space as well. But like I said, we were born into the alternative protein space, so I'm super familiar with that space. And I know a bunch of founders working on amazing things. And I think there's going to be a lot of synergies. A lot of places where we can make an impact together. But my role with Magic Valley and Parity is basically advising and helping them out on the founder journey. You learn so much so fast that you very quickly can be of value to founders that are starting, even if it's some months after you or a year after you. There's just so many learnings and introductions and synergies and collaborations that it really helps when you have someone like help you navigate all that landscape. Those are my involvement in those two companies. And then outside of that, I also keep up with my other founder friends and like stay on top of the industry as a whole, and always happy to chat with someone, whether they're starting something similar or something different. I want to stay helpful and don't want to get too busy or too big for anything. I think we're all trying to figure out hard stuff here. And the more we can work and collaborate, it's just going to move things a lot faster.
Yeah, the founder struggle is real, but it's always great to have friends that you can just have a conversation with and share ideas and get advice. So that's awesome that you have that community. One of the questions I had, just to go back to the collagen industry today, who is the biggest buyer of collagen and for what application?
Yeah, I think the majority by volume does go into food and beverage. In terms of price, volume, or cost, there's also a significant chunk going into the medical applications, as we said, and then personal care as well, and cosmetics. That's a big one as well. But like I mentioned, there's a bunch of different companies. There's also a couple of the world's largest collagen and gelatin producers as well, which will supply to these companies. But I think any big confectionery company, they use a ton of gelatin. The film industry, making photography film, all the materials, coatings, capsules, vaccine stabilizers, creams, all this. I continue to learn more about the applications. And another space that's really growing is the supplements and like nutraceutical space too. I think now if you go to the grocery store, you'll see collagen water or whatever, this functional drink with like collagen. It's really growing, and we have limited resources on this planet. We can't keep using more land to feed the animals that then need more land and more time. But there's a ton of applications, and it's really for us now about focusing because we can't boil the ocean, as we said.
Yeah, I was just wondering more like the actual company, because if it's by volume food, is it Jello, like Kraft? Is like Kraft
I mean,
buying
yeah,
up all,
yeah. There's a
all
lot of
the
that in
gelatin?
like Haribo. They make a bunch of
Yeah.
confectioner, Ferrero, and then again globally as well. So it's all over. And like I said too, even yogurt, you'll use a texturizer to make it a different texture. There's a ton of applications, and it just is in so many things that we don't even realize. We talked about supplements, these functional gummies and stuff. I mean, anything that has this chewy texture is likely thanks to gelatin and collagen.
You mentioned retina replacements, but what has been another application that really just surprised you?
I think that, and then tissue regeneration. So there's these collagen sponges you use to regenerate tissue or wound healing. That I didn't know, but I mean, it makes sense. And again, if you can use a human collagen versus like porcine or bovine, that may be even better and less chance of immunogenic responses. Or if people for religious reasons are unable to use animal derived, that would get around that issue as well. And then different injectables, whether it be for medical aesthetics or things like we talked about osteoarthritis, these things I just didn't really know a lot about until I founded the company and have learned so since. And then like the cell therapy too, it's a growing space, cell and gene therapy, where if they can grow the cells of human collagen or coat the cells, whatever they need to do to then eventually go back into a human, that is also a space. It's pretty new to me, but I think super, super exciting, and it's like on the rise.
Amazing.
So you are talking to a lot of founders. You have your finger on the pulse of what's happening in the industry, not only in the cultivated meats and the alternative proteins industry, but I'm sure a lot of other biotech companies. So it's going to be like a two-part question. Of all the companies you met, which ones do you really admire? Obviously, the founders are all great, but in terms of the bioproduct and the impact that they're making on the industry, and what do you see? Karl and I love talking about the future, but in terms of your perspective, what do you see as the future of biotech in 10 years?
So the first part of the question, which companies, or like which types of companies I find exciting? I think the companies that really are solving, I mean, it sounds obvious, but where there's a real need for it and where there's no other option than what we've been doing since forever. So things that are like picks and shovels too, where you have a lot of applications, you're not tied to one application or one industry. I think that's a real benefit. And then really solving either how things are not working today or solving like a future problem too. For us, an example, right now you can only get it from animals or humans, but even in the future, that's not going to last because the demand is going up. We can't increase it. So I think things like that have a solution today that can be ideally like relevant in the near future, where they don't have to get to huge scales and really low cost, but they can start being relevant sooner. Those types of companies I think are super, super exciting. Obviously, also if they're doing cool biotech, that is awesome, where they've made things more efficient, make them faster, make them cheaper, and just cool science. And then for the future, right now we're talking about like biotech, lab grown, or alternative protein. I think in the future, we have organic as a stamp on things, or ethically sourced. In the future, we're going to have something that's like lab grown or grown in a lab, which is going to be a good thing. It's going to be a positive. It's no longer going to be like a Frankenstein weird thing where it's like, oh, this is super futuristic. It'll be a world where we have both conventionally derived, and then we have things that are grown in the lab. We have these vertical indoor farming, stuff like this. That's a real thing. It solves a lot of issues that we don't think about. You can control the environment, and that's going to be the same thing, I think, for like cell derived. It's going to be a lot more normal. We're going to have to use it with the growing population. Consumer acceptance is just going to be, oh, that's grown in a lab. Great. That's like a category in the stores or whatever, the supermarkets, like its own little label. That's what I feel like the future is going to look like.
And we often ask the people we interview, do you have a favorite movie or book that is biotech focused that you want to share with our audience?
I mean, I don't know about anything specific. I know my favorite movies are probably the Lord of the Rings movies, just because I love that's not really biotech, but I just love these kind of alternative fantasy sort of worlds. I do think some of these kind of weird mind-bending episodes on Black Mirror, where they take someone's conscience and put it into another body, I think that stuff is super scary and also really, really fascinating. In the future, we have our human cells. Those cells actually came from a person that passed, that donated their body to science. And now, even though this person's technically, they passed months ago, even I would think more than a year ago, we're still growing his cells today. Every day in the lab, they're dividing. We're making collagen today and tomorrow, and we have been for a long time. That kind of stuff is just super fascinating. So I like a little bit weird, futuristic, like biotech enabled. I don't think I can come with anything specific, but these ones, I don't know, your mind, your soul, your body, what is actually you, and like how does that work? It's super scary, but it's really, really interesting.
Oh, I love Black Mirror. Yeah. The new season, the first episode was great with Salma Hayek, but I think the other ones weren't really sci-fi. And one was about ghosts or something. And I was like, okay, went a different direction here.
Yeah.
But I do love them all. This is so fascinating that you shared the human collagen comes from someone that had passed away.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. I just think from a story point of view.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy.
Replicating every 24 hours or so. Obviously, we also talked about whether someone on our team would just take a little biopsy, but that would probably not be the best idea. We could do it.
Oh, yeah.
But in the future, so custom personalized medicine or tissues or whatever, we can grow things in the lab now. So now we have that individuals we could virtually sell, and then you could do so much with it. But I think it's super cool. And that's also why for myself in the future, I'm going to donate my body to science if I can. I think it's important. I think it's trippy. It's weird, but it's very admirable. Crazy. The DNA is replicating every day. And like, it's just growing proteins in the lab.
Amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah.
The personalized human collagen. I think that'd be awesome if I could just use some of my own cells to make my.
Yeah.
That would be like.
Whether you want to use it for skincare, you want to, whenever we get older, our knees and stuff and our joints need a little bit of boost. We're like, all right.
And then talk about distributed manufacturing. If I can have a machine or a bioreactor in my house, and I'm like, oh no, I'm looking a little saggy. Let me just whip up my own collagen and then like
my own,
it or.
This reminds me now of that old movie like Death Becomes Her, where they live forever and then they're like, oh, and they start looking really bad and have to like spray paint themselves or whatever to like look more. They probably need
really
to need a bioreactor.
Yeah, they had the potion. I remember that. That's a great movie and actually perfect to watch since it's Halloween season. I think it's a great movie to watch now. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. This is a very good conversation.
But it's still good and it's a little bit sad, weird. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of movies back then were sad, funny, weird, dark. It was like a mixture of so many things. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that's a really interesting thought because it reminds me of, do you know who Neil deGrasse Tyson is? Mm-hmm. The astrophysicist, and I saw him speak here in New York City, and he was talking about future science that he was really excited about, or future applications, and being able to take the DNA or understanding of DNA from like a newt or a salamander, how they can regenerate their own tissue. How can we apply that to humans? So if you cut a finger off, you can just regenerate it. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
because it's in the cell. They know how to grow. The recipe is in there. It's just how do we access it? How do we use it?
There's one of the storylines in the Expanse series where I think someone loses their arm and they're going to apply medicine that allows them to regenerate. It's a painful process, but they're able to do it. And that's 120 or so years. Stephanie, we covered a lot. I know I want to be mindful of time. Was there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about today?
I feel like we've covered a lot. Yeah, we went around a lot and probably sidetracked, but I like it. No, I don't. There's nothing, I guess, in general. Always happy to chat if companies or people that are interested in collaborating or working with us, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. Always happy to have that. But other than that, I feel like we went around a lot and covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, we'd love to check in with you in a year or so and see how much progress you're making because we're excited about what you're doing and the market that you're in is a really interesting market.
Thank you.
Awesome.
So, Karl, what did you think of the interview?
Stephanie is incredible. I really enjoyed the interview. What's fascinating to me is that collagen is the most abundant protein in your body, but you do start producing less of it as you get older. Thus, you see people's skin change as they get older. Part of the reason for that is they're just not producing as much collagen as they did when they were younger. But one of the things that I really found fascinating about Stephanie is her background as an economist. And you pointed this out, the way that she looked at the market and the way that they're approaching collagen production is as an alternative to the collagen that is produced from all the animal parts that get turned into collagen. So they end up with a source that is much more reliable, higher purity, and can easily replace all that bovine and cattle or marine collagen. So it's kind of a different take than what Geltor's doing. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciated the fact that she is looking at different industries. She mentioned the pharmaceutical industry being a primary target, which makes a lot of sense because they make low volumes of product and they have more money than other markets. So it is smart from a business standpoint. But I'm really excited for all the other applications that she's talked about. Stephanie also talked about her journey as an entrepreneur and the fact that she supports other entrepreneurs and other founders and she's building a network. I think it's really important because it can be lonely sometimes. There's a lot of scenarios that can play out, but the more you have in your playbook in terms of how to make decisions for your company, the better. And the best way to get that information is from people that are actually building companies today. Of course, you can learn from history, but you can also learn from people that are doing it, because oftentimes the founders that are your friends are using current technologies or current methodologies that might be a little bit different than you, but they're working in the environment in which you're working, which is the environment of today. We're leveraging different technologies, different types of talent, different resources that all exist in today's world. So I think it's great that she's really encouraging people to reach out to her, because she has learned so much and can offer a helping hand or a soundboard.
Like you said, I think one of the things I really appreciate about the conversation is her transition from being an economist or wanting to study the economy to life science entrepreneur. You could tell that her business model and the way that she's approaching her business is very much informed by the economics of it. She's following what has become known as a recursive business model, which is really made famous by Elon Musk and Tesla. And in that business model, what you do is you start with a product that is very expensive. So for example, she's talking about creating an expensive pharmaceutical grade collagen. And once you've got that on the market and you're selling it, you use the money that you make from that to fund projects that might not be as expensive. So in the Tesla case, what you saw was a very expensive sports car. And then now 3 or 4 generations later, you've got the Tesla Y, which is fairly affordable. So you can do that with pharma and with Symbio. The other thing that I also super appreciated was the fact that you asked her and she talked about distributed biological manufacturing, which we do talk about a fair amount on the podcast, because one of the things that we learned during COVID was the fact that supply chains are very fragile. Even today, I think we're still recovering from the COVID pandemic more than a year and a half later, and supply chains still haven't been rebuilt to the robustness that they were before. And I think that's something we should explore further in future episodes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the best is thinking of the future of how to leverage not only the distributed model of manufacturing, which the most distributed would be in your own home, and to be able to create your own collagen from your own cells. I mean, that is the holy grail.
Mind blowing. Yeah.
Let's get there. Let's make that the North Star. I'm sure a lot of people that spend money on Botox and other medical aesthetics would appreciate some home brewed, personalized collagen that they can just consume in some regard or influence their cells to continue to make it. I think is probably the better bet. Because something I was thinking of, because as I was looking at collagen, there's like different ways to consume it. You can inject it, you can swallow it, you can put it on your skin, but what is the most effective way? I'm sure it's different depending on where you want the collagen to go. But I just thought that being able to think about the future, stretch our minds a little bit, can also help set a direction that is just unthinkable. I mean, that's how a lot of innovation manifests, to really push the limits of our thinking.
Absolutely. Well, I think that unless there's anything else, I think we should just call that the pod.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot going on in biotech. We have notes and notes and notes of things we want to talk about, but we will have to get to it in a future episode. One thing we definitely need to talk about in the future is all of the collaborations that are happening, especially with our friends at Ginkgo Bioworks. We talk about them a lot because they are the elephant in the room. They are the biggest synbio company, the most recognized at least. And they're doing some big things. They have a lot of partnerships. They have a partnership with Google, which we want to dissect a little bit more in terms of how they're going to leverage Google's cloud, but more so, the AI capabilities. So we will definitely explore that further in a future episode. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome. All right. Well, if you have any comments or questions or recommendations for guests for us to interview, please do text or call the Grow Everything hotline. That's the pod. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.